Welcome to a new episode of The Salon. My name is Carla van Wassem, and today we have a special guest, Robert L. Meyer, Bob. I will introduce him a little bit. Robert Meyer is a Hong Kong-based businessman and retired lawyer. He attended college and law school at Columbia University in New York and clerked for a U.S. District Court judge in Atlanta, Georgia, before joining the international law firm of Couder Brothers in New York and Hong Kong. He co-founded and was executive director of the First Pacific Group of Companies from 1981 and the Special Assets Investment Group from 1985. Mr. Meyer also co-founded Pharmalink International Limited in 1999 and is its chairman and managing director. He became a citizen of Israel in 1993 and has written and lectured about Israel and Jewish topic at large. So welcome, Bob, and I'm happy to see you.
Thank you, Carla.
Yeah. So
it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. The topic is less pleasurable, but so important. And it's called actually the elephant in the room. It's a big elephant. And it's actually bizarre that this elephant has been ignored so much, especially in the West. And the West usually thinks that how the West thinks, the rest of the world thinks, but that's not true, unfortunately, sometimes. So this whole elephant in the room, I would love to hear more about that. And it is very important that we get good notice about that to understand. And like you, I have read the Quran too, 30 years ago from the Netherlands. I was having quite some Muslim friends. I learned a lot of things that are in the same category. So I love to hear you as a student of Islam, as you wrote, what you will share to us about the elephant in the room. Yeah.
Thanks again, Carla. You may ask, or people may ask, why am I talking at all about Islam? I mean, what is the connection? And it's a good question because you don't hear that much about it. So it's reasonable for people to ask the question. The answer is that it is radical Islam who are our enemies, and a knowledge of radical Islam is extremely important because it's extremely important that we both know our enemies, that we know what motivates them, and that we know what are our reasonable expectations of them in negotiations and in other activities. And I first got interested in this subject when I began to think about the two negotiations that took place in the year 2000 and the year 2007 between the then Prime Minister of Israel, which was Ehud Barak in 2000, and Yasser Arafat under the auspices of Bill Clinton. And then in 2007, there was a repeat of that with Ehud Olmert, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert of Israel, and Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian, of the PLO, or the Palestinian Authority. And what struck me was this. We all know what happened at both those negotiations. Israel twisted itself out of shape. It made very, very generous offers of 97% of Judea and Samaria, erroneously described as the West Bank. And in the year 2000. In the year 2007, it went even further. There were discussions of slicing and dicing Jerusalem horizontally and vertically, and a land bridge between Gaza and the Palestinian territories in Judea and Samaria. And yet, in both cases, neither Yasser Arafat in the year 2000 nor Mahmoud Abbas in the year 2007 came back with a counteroffer.
Yeah.
And so I thought about this and I said, this isn't right. We all know that Arab culture is all about, bargaining, the bazaar, bargaining in the bazaar, give and take. And this didn't make any sense. I mean, there was no counteroffer. So why was that? And I asked around a bit and no one really had a good answer. I mean, they had speculations. And it occurred to me that there must be a serious reason why they couldn't do this. And as I began looking at Islamic sources, it became very clear to me, what that reason was. And the answer is found in the Quran. Yeah. In chapter 2 or Surah 2, verse 191, it says, drive them out from where they drove you out. And that verse has been unanimously interpreted by Muslim scholars for 1,400 years to mean the following, that once land becomes Islamic, it's Islamic forever. There's no going back. And this is...
If I may interject here, because it's so important, even if they conquered it, it's not that they were living there, even if they go new to it and conquer it, it has the same value. So too bad that they were Jews before.
Correct. Anyway, the land is acquired for Islam. Yeah, it's Islamic forever. In fact, Israeli professor Mordecai Kedar says there's a one-way ticket into Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam, but there's no ticket out. And so from an Islamic point of view, in the year 637, the Caliph Umar conquered Jerusalem and its environs, and it became part of Dar al-Islam, part of the House of Islam. And that remained virtually unchanged with the exception of the 188-year Crusader period from 1095 or 1096 until 1918, when the British General Allenby conquered Jerusalem, and then later with the institution of the League of Nations mandate. And so the point of all of it is that Islam does not allow them to recognize Jewish sovereignty or Jewish reign over Islamic land. End of story. Yeah. It's as simple as that. And, you know, I raised this once with Alan Dershowitz, who said, well, I knew Yasser Arafat. He was secular. And I wasn't at a venue where I could have a debate with Alan, who I admire greatly. But the reality is that Arafat was born in Egypt, and he was introduced to the Palestinian cause through the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah. And even if he was 100% secular, which he wasn't, his people are very religious. There have been a number of surveys done among Palestinians wherever they're living in Gaza, within Israel, but certainly in the so-called Palestinian territories, that ask them, how important is religion in your life? And something like 97% say extremely important. Yeah. So they're thinking religion, but we're not. Yeah. And it's a shame that the negotiators and commentators and people in diplomacy, not only in the United States and in Europe, but also in Israel, think that they're negotiating with the man in the mirror. That is someone who thinks the way that they do, and they are not. Yeah. And that's the whole point of it.
That is such an insight that people don't get. I have heard that from Melanie Phillips, and I've also heard that from Einat Wilf. They are from two different angles, and they come with the same thing. But it looks like new for a lot of people, if they even listen to it. You don't get it.
Well, you're right. And the problem is that it's not easy to learn about Islam. It takes time and persistence. In Islam, you're not supposed to actually teach the religion to people who are not otherwise going to convert. Yeah. And it's complicated the way there's actually 3 holy books in Islam, I would maintain. There's the Quran, which everyone understands is the revelations to Muhammad of Allah through the angel Gabriel, starting in the year 610. But 91 places in the Quran are words to the effect of Allah saying, well, follow the example of my prophet. And yet, of course, the prophet is Muhammad, but we don't have any information about Muhammad in the Quran. And so by stating it 91 times, it's obviously important. And early Muslims deemed it to be important. And within the first 200 years after the death of Muhammad, indeed, there were put together 2 books. One is called the Hadith, which is the record of the sayings and the doings or the deeds of Muhammad. And the second is the Sirah, which is the biography of the Prophet Muhammad. And the Hadith, in the Hadith, Muslim scholars went through some 600,000 stories and authenticated them and boiled them down to, I forget the exact number, it's something like 6,300, something like that, of stories that they had attribution for that they believed to be correct. And they're all about what Muhammad said and Muhammad did. And from the knowledge of what Muhammad said and did, we know how to follow his example and to be like him if you're a Muslim. Same thing with the Sirah. There was a biography written, and it covered all the details of Muhammad's life, his personal habits, how he ate, things he liked to eat. I mean, huge personal detail, not to mention a lot of stories about him with Jihad, which I'll get to in a moment. So those, and when there's a scholar named Professor Bill Warner who examined each of those books line by line to make a division between those lines of text that dealt with what he calls political Islam, and that means Islam vis-a-vis non-Muslims, kafirs or kuffar in Arabic, and then just personal religious Islam. In other words, if you're interested in how to avoid hell and go to heaven in Islam, and how to pray 5 times a day, and when do you take your shoes off, and all this kind of stuff, this is personal Islam. That's fine. That's for practitioners of the religion of Islam. But 75% of the combined material in those books deals with political Islam, Islam vis-a-vis the kafirs, the infidels, and I use that word on purpose. I should also add, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. In the 2007 negotiation, the same thing happened. Mahmoud Abbas came back and he made no agreement. He couldn't accept anything. There's an Israeli Arab journalist named Khaled Abu Tomeh, who I know, and I once asked him why he thought that Yasser Arafat in the 2000 negotiation didn't make a counteroffer. And he said he spoke to Yasser Arafat in Arabic when he returned and asked him the same question. And Arafat said as follows: because the Israelis would not give us 100%. Exactly.
3% less.
It's not just the West Bank or Judea and Samaria. It's clear, by the way, from the Palestinian Authority, they describe the land, what they call the land of Palestine, for us, Eretz Yisrael, as an Islamic WAQF. WAQF, WAQF in English, is a inalienable religious endowment. And there are quotations from religious authorities in the Palestinian Authority saying you cannot facilitate the loss of even a millimeter of it. It all belongs to Islam. We all know that the Hamas Charter also describes the land of Palestine in Article 11 as an Islamic Waqf, consecrated for future Muslim generations forever until Judgment Day. And no part of it can be squandered nor given up. So the concept that they are going to recognize Israeli sovereignty over any part of this land fails. And it's obvious it's never been a genuine negotiation by the Palestinians.
If I may interject here, that the word genuine, what you meant, it is like they have not spoken about that, just guys, whatever you try. I know for years that they don't want peace, they want the whole peace. But they never exactly said that most of the time. A lot of Israelis are unbeknownst with it, or they have not used this in their politics at all. Knowing that it's really they just don't want it because of the religious background. They looked at it like they're secular. No, they're not. It's like they live at the WAQF, right? That's totally important.
Yes, and they also view Israeli concessions as weakness, which is another story. If we have time, we'll get to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which is based on. These are stories and considerations, by the way, that are widely known among Muslims, widely known.
Yeah.
Everyone knows the story of Muhammad, just like in Christianity, everyone knows the story of Jesus. And in Judaism, people know the story of our Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses and Joseph and others. So it's not mysterious to them. It's fundamental.
Yeah, so, exactly. Not for us. Yeah.
So I'll tell you something interesting. Shimon Peres was visiting Hong Kong, and I mentioned this to him, and he said, no. We made peace with Egypt, and we made peace with Jordan.
Yeah.
So I was wrong. So the answer is he's right and he's wrong. Why is he right? In order to understand it, you have to go back a bit to the opening up between Israel and Egypt when Anwar Sadat came and visited Jerusalem. After in I don't know what year it was. I think it was 1978 or 79, and he came to Jerusalem, and what he wanted back was the Sinai, every inch of it. And in due course, the negotiations began. And Israel's negotiating position is, we'll give you back the Sinai, but, and the but was a sticking point, we need to keep a presence at Sharm el-Sheikh in the southern tip as a listening post, and also at the Mitla Pass in the western mountains of Sinai, and the two Israeli developed tourist communities, Haba and Yamit in the Sinai, not far from Eilat. And Anwar Sadat said, no, every square inch. And that's ultimately what Israel agreed to. But then you have to ask yourself, why did Egypt agree to it? Because it was not getting back for Islam every square inch. And the answer is, I realize the answer is that Anwar Sadat took the position that his responsibility as the leader of Egypt was to get back every square inch of Egyptian administered Muslim land. That is up to the border of Israel.
Yeah.
And only that was his responsibility. And that ties in with what happened with Jordan and with what happened with the Arab League. The Jordan negotiation is even a little bit more interesting. In June of, it starts out that in June of 1988, King Hussein of Jordan renounced all Jordanian claims to Judea and Samaria, which he had wishfully renamed for 19 years the West Bank. And then we find 6 years later, he signs a peace treaty in October of 1994 with Israel. Okay. In the meantime, the Arab League, I think at about this time, also issued a proclamation that it was the responsibility only of the Palestinians to regain the land of Palestine. All right, so let's see what happened with the negotiation in the treaty between Israel and Jordan. The treaty was signed, indeed, in October of 1994, but there were three problematic areas. There was a tiny island in the Jordan called Peace Island, which the Israelis had used for Boy Scout and Girl Scout encampments and things like that. And then there were two areas of arable cultivated land in the Arava, south of the Dead Sea, which went over into Jordanian territory. So there was an annex to that peace treaty, and in Annex 1A and Annex 1B, these matters were resolved. First of all, Israel fully recognized Jordanian sovereignty over all three pieces of land. Okay, so the principle of Jordan returning every square inch of Jordanian land was embraced by Israel. However, Jordan agreed that Israel could use, but there was no formal leasehold or any kind of legal document. It was a use of fruct, we would say in American or English law, those lands for the very same purposes they had been used before, for a rolling 25-year period, unless either party, either Jordan or Israel, terminated that arrangement 1 year before the end of the 25-year period, which ended in 2019. And sure enough, Jordan gave notice in October of 2018 that they wanted it back. And they, as far as I'm aware, they got it back.
1 year's notice, right?
Yeah, so it was kind of a delayed, reacquisition. But King Hussein and his successor, King Abdullah, could turn around to his people, put his hand on his heart, and say correctly, "I got back for us every square inch of Jordanian-administered Muslim land," which was true, and Israel agreed to that. So that leaves the Palestinians. They have the problem from a Muslim point of view of regaining all the rest of the land back. And as many people have noted, they're not just interested in Judea and Samaria, the areas that were the subject of the Oslo Accords, but they're interested in everything lying between the river, the Jordan River, and the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. So that was the situation. And it's the lack of knowledge of this, or the lack of appreciation of first of all, even knowing about it, but secondly, lodging its importance, that prevents us from coming to some kind of true understanding of where the other side is coming.
Yeah.
And it's really critical. I mean, of course, the result of that is that there is no solution.
Exactly.
There is no solution.
Exactly.
So then we get, for those concerned about Israel, we come back to, well, what should Israel do?
Yeah.
And the best answer I know is the one given by Mordechai Kedar, which says that Israel must be invincible. And let me explain why that's important. To do that, we have to look at a little piece of Islamic history. Muhammad started his preaching in Mecca in the year 610 until 622. And he was driven out of Mecca, which was loaded with different polytheistic groups, all of whom were allowed to pray at the Kaaba, the black cube that's there to this day. He was from the dominant tribe of the Quraysh people. And in Mecca, he used only a nonviolent, just a persuasion and talking to people and telling them about Islam, and the converts that he finally achieved after 12 years of trying were very few. When he was driven out, and he was driven out on the issue that he felt that only Muslims should be allowed to pray at the Kaaba.
Yeah.
And the other tribe said, no, thank you, goodbye. And in fear of his life, he left. How many people left with him? Well, people don't know this. It's estimated to be between 100 and 150. And where did he go? And this is the famous Hijra or Hijira that's described, the fleeing. He goes to a place then called Yathrib. And Yathrib is kind of a rival city to Mecca. It was more agricultural, whereas Mecca was more trading and caravan business oriented. But Yathrib had something interesting in it. It had 50% Jewish population spread among 3 tribes there. And Muhammad said to himself, once I get to Yathrib, the Jews will recognize me because they know their scriptures. Yeah. They will see and accept me as the successor prophet to all the other prophets, and everything will be great. So he arrives in 622, and for about a year and a half, he uses the old peaceful methods of persuasion and fails. Yeah. The Jews do not accept him. They, in fact, make fun of him. And ultimately, he adopts jihad, which I'll get to in just a few more minutes. But let's fast forward to the year 628. He's used jihad, and it's been wildly successful. In fact, one scholar estimated that between 623 and Muhammad's death in 632, there were 65 various armed conflicts where he used jihad. He won most of them, but not all of them. And afterward, he had conquered virtually all of Arabia, and the number of his followers was estimated to have increased from 150 to 100,000. So jihad was extremely successful. And I'm going to get to the fundamentals of it in a second. But in 628, Muhammad already had a force, an army. And so he decides it's time to go and pray at the Kaaba in Mecca. And he's met outside Mecca at a little village called Hudaybiyah. And the polytheists of Mecca say, you're not coming in. But they agreed to sign a 10-year treaty. And the treaty said more or less as follows. The first year, Muhammad can't come in. But year two, he can bring a couple, small group of people, and they can come for, I forget whether it's 2 or 3 days to pray, and then they got to go. And then each year thereafter, more people could come for a longer period of time. However, by the second year, there happens to erupt a skirmish between Muhammad's Muslims and the polytheists, unconnected with him. And he uses that as excuse to break the treaty and to march on and actually conquer Mecca, which he did in 630. Yeah. And the lesson that Muslims learn from that is as follows. First of all, what I neglected to mention is that in that 2-year period, he built up his forces. And so he was much stronger. And there's a doctrine in Islam, which some people call the doctrine of restraint, which gives them great patience, which says, if you can't afford to fight now, for example, and win now, that's okay. You need to bide your time and wait until your forces are stronger, or the other side's forces are weaker, or both. And then you can move ahead and do it. So they think long term. They're not looking for short term. They're thinking long term with long term goals. And for that reason, the Palestinians, in my opinion, are influenced by the lesson of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, and they have all the time in the world. And if you listen to them, they have no desire to pull back and wait. I mean, I'm talking about the radical Islamists that are really embedded in the jihadist mentality. Okay, so let me go ahead.
No, with the percentages, if you just only look at Gaza, the percentages that people speak often about innocent Palestinians, and many of those support tremendously the whole situation. I mean, where are the innocent Palestinians that said, "Oh, their hostages are hidden," or please let's surrender? Hamas will never surrender. That doesn't work. That doesn't make sense. But the percentage is very high. You see the joy that they had in murdering and torturing and all that, and at their own video show. And that mentality is so far away from let's go for a solution too. It's impossible. May I go back for a little bit? And that is something that I do. I know that Egypt then wanted very much Gaza to be for Israel, right? They withdrew that. Why didn't they keep Gaza?
Well, because it was loaded with Palestinians.
That's the reason.
They lost it after the '67 war. Yeah. But it was never really part of Egypt, Gaza. It was kind of an overflow of Palestinians. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the reason. Okay, because the rest they cared so much about. Yeah. Well, Sharm el-Sheikh was a sad story. Yeah.
Well, it would have been nice if they said, okay, that's not unreasonable, help keep the peace. No. My point is that both Sadat and King Hussein were true to their word. They had to at least be able to go back to their Muslim populations and say, we got it all back. Yeah. Hooray. Yeah. Yeah. We followed Surah 2, verse 191 of the Quran. I want to. You were about to lead into something that I was going to talk about, which is the importance of understanding jihad and what's allowed under jihad. The sad fact is that everything and anything goes in jihad. What do I mean by that? It means that not only is it allowable, it's encouraged for practitioners of jihad. These are jihadists or mujahideen, which it means jihadists in Arabic. Yeah. They can murder, they can torture, they can terrorize, they can oppress, they can humiliate, they can rape, they can bring into sexual slavery, they can behead, they can burn, they can beat, they can steal, they can lie, they can use insults, threats, mockery, cursing, and any other form of violence or threat of violence on the infidels, on the kuffar, provided that, and I'm going to underscore it's provided that, it's done in the name of jihad for the advancement of Islam. And how do we know that? We know that from Muhammad, because there are stories about people asking him, well, can we do this or can we do that? And him saying yes, and him encouraging them to do all of the above. So, when the Western press described the events of October 7th as and the Hamas fighters as being savages and barbarians, and I can't think of the other word, other words of that like, that is not at all how they see themselves. As you know, they see themselves as holy warriors, carrying out the will of Allah, and proud of it, photographing it, videoing it, send it back in, back to family and friends and around the world. And that's, the scary part of jihad. Yeah. And, so you might ask, well, what's in it for them? Why are they so fervent about it? And religiously, is there some special benefit? The answer is yes. A jihadist who is killed in the act of jihad, or even if he gets only as far as planning jihad and dies, he achieves two important post-mortem benefits. Number one, he goes directly to the highest circle of heaven in Islam, where he can cavort with 72 houris, or sometimes called virgins. For eternity. For eternity.
I'm looking so forward to that.
That's a great promise.
Yeah.
But secondly, there's something else that people just don't know about, but you can look it up. They also avoid what's called the terrors of the grave. And that's the Muslim belief that after death and quick burial, which they do, angels and devils appear in the grave, and there occurs a terrifying fight over the soul of the Muslim who's awake for this, to determine whether he's going to be sent to heaven or to hell. And that's something that they're very much afraid of. In fact, there was a survey done in, I forget which Muslim country, and they asked people, what are you more afraid of, dying or the terrors of the grave? And the answer was by far the terrors of the grave. So they get a free pass from the terrors of the grave. And so that's what's in it for them. And this jihadist mentality is spread all throughout the jihadist world of Islam. It certainly exists in Iran, which are Shiite jihadists, and with Hezbollah, which is Iranian-controlled, but also Shiite jihadists in Lebanon, with the Houthis, who are also Shiites in Yemen, with Islamic Palestinian Jihad and Hamas, who are Sunnis in the Palestinian areas, with Boko Haram, which is in West Africa, and many other places. It's all the same story. They all get it, and they all know what they're doing. Yeah. And, people don't know about it. People don't realize that Hamas is an acronym for the Islamic resistance movement, not just the resistance movement, the Islamic resistance movement. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to understand what's going on. I've noted to some people, look at all the money that's spent by the Jewish and non-Jewish communities on studying and on trying to understand the Holocaust, the Shoah, in the 1940s and before, and to understand the motivations and the ideology of the Nazis and the techniques that are used and so forth and so on. I'm telling you, not 1/10 of 1%, I would guess, of that money is spent on understanding the Islamic jihadist enemies of the Jewish people today? Nothing.
And I think it is so frightening today because and I'm not afraid, but if you see what is going on the internet, what people believe and what the lies are spread and taken as belief, for me, I look like, okay, the Holocaust of Shoah was possible with the limited propaganda of the Nazis. But today we have so much more propaganda and so many where people just don't know what they talk about and they attack and they hate, and it is huge. And even a lot of Jews don't get this. And so what you're sharing today, this should be known to everybody. This should be known to every Israeli as well. You know?
Every Israeli, and Western people. And it's hard because once you start discussing Islam, it's the only religion that if you're not a Muslim and you start talking about it and you don't become Muslim, you run the risk of being called an Islamophobe.
Yeah, tell me.
Which, by the way, is a misnomer. The word phobia means fear. An Islamophobe is one who fears Islam, but it's used with the meaning in Islam hater.
Yeah, Islamic people. Islamic people. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you study Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, and don't become one of them, that doesn't make you a Hinduphobe, a Buddhistphobe, a Christophobe, or a Judeophobe of any kind.
Yep.
But this is used very much to push people back, so they won't uncover what they have found.
But that comes also from the West. I know they use it themselves, but like in the Netherlands, I have, like I said before, quite some Muslim friends. It's used to say it's also used by other people. Oh, you say that, you cannot say that, or oh, you're Jewish, you cannot say that. What? I'm not saying anything. We speak about facts here.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get criticized as being an Islamophobe for the remarks I've made just now, but I'm just telling you what they say. You get it by reading what they say. Yes, I don't read fluent Arabic, but I read English, and you can put it together. It's plain meaning. They understand it.
Well, you said that also in your article in the beginning that it has been vetted by Islamists, by people that knew everything and they agreed with it. That's very smart that you did that, because that gives really, this is as it is.
Right. Islam is a supremacist religion or political system, if you will. It's when Jews and Christians are treated as second-class citizens, there was a choice made for Jews and Christians in medieval Islam that they could become what's called dhimmis. It's spelled D-H-I-M-M-I, a dhimmi.
Yeah.
And a dhimmi is someone who has second-class citizenship. He pays a jizya tax, as kind of a protection tax, of 50% of his earnings.
Yeah.
And but he has to, if he sees a Muslim on a horse walking by, he has to step aside on the sidewalk. He's not allowed to ride on a horse or a donkey. His head is not allowed to be higher than a Muslim. You can't build a synagogue or a church higher than a mosque.
Yeah.
And so forth. It's designed, frankly, to be a kind of a slow death, a constant oppression, so that eventually Christians and Jews will just say, to heck with it, I'm going to become Muslim. And it's important to understand that that's in use all the time, to put down people who criticize, or not even criticize, who just
share facts, just sharing facts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the word infidel in Arabic, because it's really quite different than the word that we use, which in English, which is infidel. Infidel comes from the Latin non-believer, infidel. Okay, not faithful, not believing. The word in Arabic is kafir. Yeah. In the singular, that's an infidel, but and by the way, it's no connection to the South African N word, which happens to exist. There's no connection.
No.
And so the question is, what is the real meaning of kafir? Because the Muslims understand the Muslims understand it to be extremely derogatory and delegitimizing. The Arabic word is linguistically related to the Hebrew word root, which you could call, CFR, hard CFR, which means to cover up. And so what's the connection? The connection is this, that the Muslim view of non-Muslims, such as Jews, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, is not that they have some other but legitimate, but different religious path to God, which should be respected. Rather, it's the opposite. It's that these non-Muslims very well know that there's only one God, Allah, and only one prophet of Allah, being Muhammad, and yet we choose to cover it up. We're cover-uppers. That's the connotation there. And we do that to promote our own respective so-called false religions. So it's important to note that that's quite derogatory. And, when you have kumbaya sessions, interfaith sessions, I don't want to tar all Muslims with the worst part of Islam from our standpoint.
No.
But for some of them, it's really quite nonsensical, because from a Muslim point of view, there is no respect. They have Islamicized the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament and all the prophets and writings. According to them, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were Muslims, as was Moses and Jesus.
Yeah.
And they changed it. And when they're asked, they don't believe, in the case of Christianity, in the virgin birth of Jesus or in his divinity as a man. Fine. But when asked, well, what about what the New Testament says? Their answer is it's been corrupted by the Christians, and that the Hebrew Bible has been corrupted by the Jews. They go back and say Islam pre-existed all these religions, and everyone who came along was one form of Muslim for another. You can see the supremacy in that attitude.
Yeah.
So
it's that's very scary, because if you start to think like that, then there is no place for any other thought than that, and that means that is the root of so many problems, or will be more.
Right.
Wow.
So I guess that's kind of wraps up my very brief remarks on the subject. There's a lot to go through, but I really think it's important to know your enemy, and the jihadists are our enemy. I don't care what anyone says. You'll never persuade me that they're somehow not our enemy. And by the way, they're not just the enemy of the Jews. There's a saying among jihadists: first, the Saturday people, the Jews; second, the Sunday people, the Christians; and then third, everybody else.
Yeah. They see it openly in different countries. I have heard it in the Netherlands too. I've been in troubles in those areas. So, wow, fantastic. Yeah, it is. I hope many people will watch you and listen to you speaking. That will be awesome.
Thank you.
So we are ending kind of this, right? So then we have now something related, also negative. We usually do the anti-Semite of the week, somebody that has some ideas that we find very frustrating. And so our anti-Semite of the week, I actually side with you in the same story. I decided, because it's so related, what you just spoke about. So here you go, Bob. What is your anti-Semite of the week?
Well, my anti-Semite of the week, which may be a little bit overblown, but is the Biden administration.
Even if it's a little overblown, it's just a terrible feeling. I'm with you. Yeah.
They on Monday of this week, they stabbed Israel in the back at the United Nations by abstaining from a vote which called for Israel to cease fire without having as a precondition the release of all the hostages. And this whole notion that a ceasefire makes sense is nonsensical. It's like having a house that's 3/4 burned down and saying, okay, well, let's stop fighting the fire now because that's the right thing to do. It would be, using a World War II analogy, if the Allies were approaching Berlin and then said to the Nazi leadership, okay, we're not going to go into Berlin. You can hold it. We're gonna stop now. Israel is completely united. I mean, just about, I think it's something like 85% know that they have to go forward and finish the job of defeating Hamas. And I'll get to that when I get to my hero. But that step taken by the Biden administration was a kind of an echo of the step taken by Barack President Barack Obama in January, in the last couple weeks of his presidential term, January of 2017. Donald Trump had been elected. There was a vote in the UN to recognize the Temple Mount as being a Muslim religious site. No mention of Jewish.
I remember that. Yeah.
And the U.S. abstained, which is just ludicrous. Yeah. There's so much evidence to the contrary. We all know it, and scholars know it. Everybody knows it, and it was just it's a stab in the back. It really was terrible. In this case, when you have Security Council resolutions, they can lead to sanctions and the like. Hopefully that won't happen, but you just never know. But the step taken by the Biden administration, I feel was. Gives them the award for anti-Semites of the week. Although, they still are supplying munitions to Israel, but who knows how long that's going to last.
For how long, indeed. And then the words of Chuck Schumer, another backstabber.
Right.
And we live in an election year. It's just terrible. It's just disgusting in a way. And what you said about the hostages, so many people, of course it's horrific. You kill our babies. Well, it's a bit more nuanced, I would say, than give the hostages back, then surrender. That's not in the same sentence.
They can't.
Okay, now the hero of the week. I have my same. I join you in the story. It's just same frustration. So, what you was your hero, heroine? Who would that be? Oh yeah, I know.
We talked about it. My hero of the week is Benjamin Netanyahu as Prime Minister of Israel. I know Netanyahu's a controversial figure. Some people hate him. He's been reelected so many times, and more people like him than not. But I am admiring him, provided he keeps it up, in standing firm against unbelievable pressure against Israel from the United States, from European allies, from people like French President Macron, who said that if Israel moves the million people from Rafah, it's actually 3 miles to a beach area. Yeah. So they're out of the way of fire when Israel invades, that is a war crime. It's just preposterous. And he has stood firm. He's been tough, which I commend him on. I've heard people say that even if Netanyahu, God forbid, had a heart attack and died, whoever immediately took his place would still conduct the same policy. The Israel public knows they have to do this. Yeah. So I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. It's very, very hard. And he's just about my age, actually. But he stood up tough, and we need to do that. And, someone remarked to me, we're so alone. I said, look, we've always been alone. You can find that statement in the Torah of the prophet Balaam, so stating, the Jewish people shall live alone. That's not the point. The point is that if we go in, if we stop now, we will show such weakness that the entire nation of Israel, in my opinion, will be hostage. Not 134 hostages. The entire 10 million person nation of Israel, including 21% Arabs, because the Arabs will rightly say, look, we can go in there, conduct a pogrom, massacre them, fight them, and not be defeated, and live to fight another day. And so let's do it again. Let's do some more.
Yeah.
It absolutely has to be stopped, and it's not an easy job.
Yeah.
So anyway, kudos to him.
Thank you for that. That's I'm so with you there, and that's also why I chose him, because it's not even important if you agree with him, whatever it is. What he does is so extremely difficult, and all the heat, and that's also a bit an Israeli mentality, and sometimes a little bit Jewish. I think, like Chaim Weizmann, the first president of Israel, said, other people are president over a country, and I'm president over presidents, right? And it is with everybody except, especially the people that do not live in Israel, and what they say there we know, or don't know. But in America, it's like, mind your own business. Who, as an American Jew that doesn't do anything, is going to school or work, has a great life? Why do you have to have such an opinion about that? You're not risking your life. Why would you add more negativity to it? Nobody's perfect to begin with, but I have a lot of respect for Netanyahu, exactly what you said, that he kept standing, and that to take all that heat, it must be very, very difficult. Yeah.
And the message the U.S. is giving is that you can't trust the U.S. to be an ally. Look at this stab in the back of Israel. Everybody gets it. They all see it. Jewish people in the past 24 hours, 48 hours, have been terribly upset about it, and others too.
Yeah. The people that care, at least.
Yeah. I mean, whether it was Israel or another ally, the United States should not do such things. No. It's not standing up. It's Biden caving in for political reasons to his hard left supporters who are a minority, and it's terrible.
And the psychology of the scapegoats. What always bothers me is why is there so much focus on Israel by the entire world and the Palestinians, not about all the other people? I mean, why would you have such an opinion about what happens in other countries, not your country? But anyway, thank you so very much, Bob. I don't think we resolve it in 1 hour. I would love that. But at least we have much more clarity. I hope everybody. And thank you so very much. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.